Hello and welcome back. I'm Karen Sullivan of Soul Symbols, and this is our Friday contemplation. On Mondays, I look at the wider sky, the broad view in the larger pattern, and that archetypal web moving through our collective field. And on Fridays, I come down to the ground into our lived reality and that felt texture of a pattern. So we will be moving on Fridays into deeper explorations of not only what it means in the sky, but in our bodies, choices, relationships, and in the deeper architecture of life. So get your headphones, put your feet up, and enjoy this reflection with me. At the new moon in Taurus, we began in the fertile valley. And that was an image that really stayed with me. That valley, the crescent moon, and the richness of earth. It felt like the place where life begins quietly and below the surface. Taurus asks us to come back to the body of the world, to the soil and roots, the flower. To food and touch, beauty, it asks for slowness. In tarot, Taurus belongs with Venus and the Empress. And that Empress is a beautiful image of nature's abundance. She's the garden and field, the womb of life. She's the part of the world that knows how to grow without rushing. And so at that new moon, something was seeded. It might have been an intention or a feeling, or maybe it was just a small instinct, a quiet stirring, but that sense that something wanted to take root. Now, as we arrive at the full moon in Sagittarius, that same seed has travelled through the cycle. It's pushed upward and open, and it met with the light. So what began in the valley is now beginning to bloom into wildness. Sagittarius is more than an enclosed garden. It's the hillside, that open plain, the southern fire and the horizon. Sagittarius is a sign of the centaur and the archer. It's the body of instinct joined with a search for meaning. It's carrying a bow and an arrow and asking, where are we going? What do we believe in, and what truth is calling us forward? And so for me, this full moon feels like a moment of ripening. That flower that began in the Taurus Valley is more than a flower now. It's moving towards fruit. And fruit is a powerful image for a full moon because it's fulfillment. It's the sweetness of a process made visible. And it appears after the root has held, the stem has risen, and the flower has opened. It's an image of life, trusting its own timing. But that fruit also contains seed. And so this is a culmination, the fruit that is already carrying the future. And this is where Artemis comes into this contemplation for me. In myth, Artemis asked Zeus for her bow and arrows. Zeus, or Jupiter, is the ruler of Sagittarius. So there's a beautiful symbolic link here. Artemis receives the gift of the bow from Jupiter. She receives the power of aim, direction, wildness, and independence. Artemis belongs to the wild places, to the forest and mountain, the edge of civilization. She is the guardian of young life and wild creatures, but she's also untamed. Her world is not the domesticated world. She carries her own sovereignty. So under this Sagittarius full moon, we can ask ourselves, what part of us is asking for its bow? Where are we ready to aim, and what grew quietly in the valley that is now seeking a direction to aim? The bow and arrow are symbols of action and intention. The bow needs to be drawn back before that arrow can be released. So there's a tension before movement and a stillness as we take aim. There's a moment where the whole body gathers itself around the question of direction. And Sagittarius is that question. Where is the arrow pointing, and what truth are we following? What meaning has ripened from the facts, the signs, conversations, small pieces of information gathered along the way? And this matters because the full moon takes place across the Gemini and Sagittarius axis. Gemini is ruled by Mercury, and Mercury is the magician in tarot. And that magician gathers the tools, names the symbols, and he arranges what he has on the table, all of the elements. Gemini notices everything. So it's listening, speaking, questioning. It connects and compares. And then it brings the facts, the messages, and the fragments. It brings them into words. But Sagittarius wants wisdom. So the full moon asks us to move from that information of Gemini into the meaning of Sagittarius. So we're taking the facts and bringing understanding. The busyness, the noise, we're bringing into truth. And from all that information and the many voices, we're moving into a deeper story that can hold them. And Jupiter, ruler of Sagittarius, is also the wheel of fortune. And the wheel turns just as time and cycles turn. The moon grows from dark to full and begins again. There's something fated in this image, especially with the nodes of the moon involved in the mutable cross of the sky. It gives this moment a threshold feeling, as though we're doing more than observing a full moon. It's a feel of standing within a turning. So we have something changing shape and crossing over here. The thing that began as a seed is now becoming a fruit. Sagittarius is also connected with the tarot card Temperance, and this brings in the alchemy of the moment. Temperance is the card of alchemy. It's the art of mixing the things that appear separate, fire and water, our body and spirit, instinct and wisdom, the earth and the sky. Temperance doesn't rush the transformation. It pours carefully, blends and refines. So perhaps this full moon isn't looking for quick answers. Perhaps it's asking for a more alchemical question. What are we mixing within ourselves? What has the fertile earth of Taurus given us? And what has the wildfire of Sagittarius awakened in us? Can rootedness and wildness belong together? Can that Empress and Artemis speak to one another? The Empress roots us in life, and Artemis is calling us into the wild. So Temperance teaches us how to hold both without splitting ourselves apart. And the full moon is a moment of tension. And then we have the image of the centaur. Sagittarius is the centaur. And in myth, Chiron is the great wise centaur. He's the wounded healer and the teacher of heroes. Chiron's wisdom is more than abstract. And it's not wisdom that's held above life. It's wisdom that's passed through the body, through pain and experience, through the wound that becomes that place of teaching. So under this full moon, perhaps we're not only asking what's ripened, but what has it taught us? What has life shown us through the process of growing? What do we know now because we've lived through something? It's not just an intellectual learning. And this brings us back to the fruit again. because the fruit of this full moon is an insight. It could be a clearer direction or the courage to release an arrow that we've been holding on for too long. It might also be the recognition that something planted in darkness has now reached the point where it can be offered. So what began in the fertile valley is now hanging beneath an open sky. The root and flower of Taurus is meeting Sagittarius as fire and air. That flower has bloomed into wildness, and the wildness has ripened into fruit. But the beautiful imagery of that fruit is it is carrying the seed of our next becoming. So for this full moon, the invitation is to pause with the fullness of the cycle, to look back to what was seeded at the Taurus New Moon and notice what's opened, what's moved and become visible, and what it is that is reaching toward the horizon. And we can ask ourselves gently but truthfully, what sort of fruit have we been gathering, and where is the wisdom? What is the wisdom that's ripened? Are we pointing our arrow toward anything? And what is it? We can also ask ourselves, can I release that arrow with the rootedness of the Empress, the sovereignty of Artemis, that wisdom of the wounded healer Centaur, and the quiet alchemy of Temperance? And that is what I have for you. Thank you for being here. And I'll be back on Monday with the broader picture of the sky. And until then, I invite you to be tender with yourselves. Be honest with what is surfacing and listen carefully for what is alive at depth. Have a restful weekend. And I will see you on the next one.